Hello, everyone. This is Adam Parker of the Detox Blueprint program. I'm super excited. We've got another client success story with my good friend D. And this is a real special story. He was able to go from really being bedridden when we first started working together to now he's got his full health back. And most importantly, he's got his energy back as well. He's joined us today all the way from the States, and he's here to talk about his story. So D, welcome.
Hello.
It's been a pleasure working with you, man. And it's been a real transformation from really the first conversation all the way to now. And it's been great seeing your recovery and the learnings and the evolution in your mindset as well. So let's start things off. Tell us about who you are, where you're from, and really what was the problem you came to us with?
So my name is D. I am a artist, musician. Also, I am an energy work practitioner. I've been in both those fields for at least almost 10 years now. I just remember being down bad for a very long time. I was, the day after my mom passed, I ended up catching the flu. And during that flu at that time, the house essentially didn't know what that was. And so me and my partner at the time, we were trying to figure it out. So we actually ended up going to the ER or an urgent care. And they told us that it wasn't that they couldn't figure out what it was on a test, that we just had a viral infection. So we ended up getting prescribed medications from them to fight off this viral infection. And during that time and process, everything was already heavy. Emotions were high, just a lot of stuff between the family was going on, obviously, through that time. And so, us having to deal with this was just really just kind of such a sideswipe, if you will. And upon that time, getting those medications, I guess we took those medications, and then maybe within a week or so, everything flipped over for me. And it was through that time that I realized that I was not okay, or stuff was not okay. And it went from that to having the flu for an extra 2 months. Going back to the ER that next week, they looked at me and were like, "You weren't supposed to take anything at all." Like the people that prescribed it to me essentially got in trouble because it became more of a life issue now instead of just a regular sick or a regular issue on that aspect. And from then on, it just shut everything down. I went from being active, lively to, making music, being the entrepreneur, being in the entertainment industry, making content, to someone that couldn't even move. I couldn't get off the bed. I couldn't interact with anyone or anything. I couldn't, I didn't have the energy to live, to function. I couldn't necessarily think. My body was overexerted. I dealt with first class medical grade insomnia. I dealt with, just stuff in heart issues, high blood pressure, high heart rate, blood sugar issues, things that I never, and this all happened within the span of months, and something I've never thought I would have to experience in my 26, 27 years of life, things that were very foreign and very new to me. And it became something of a norm, being down for about 6 months. I just remember feeling like that there was really nowhere to turn to. I remember feeling like that there was nothing that I could do, because at that time I had to stop working, I had to stop my career. I just got signed to a modeling agency at that time. I had to stop that. And I just felt like that everything was against me at that point, and it was just something that I never thought to expect to be such a shift or a transition in my new life, because I didn't think that there was a way out,
Dude, I mean, it sounded like a lot of stuff compounded all at once. The passing of your mother, the medications that shouldn't have been taken, a lot of things just kind of compounded, right? And then all of a sudden you kind of fall out the other side and you've got these issues that aren't going away. What was a normal day-to-day scenario like for you? You said you were, when we met, you were bedridden. How was it impacting your life? So you've gone through this scenario, you're out the other side. What does life look like? How is it impacting your day-to-day compared to before it all happened?
It was slow. It was a drag. There wasn't any pace. There wasn't any, it was, you'd wake up, I would wake up and I would just remember laying down. Obviously I'd have to, go to the restroom, or if I was even able to eat food, I would have to try to do both. And actually, during that time, my whole body shut down. I wasn't able to eat any foods whatsoever. Ever. Didn't matter if it was, anything from just like, organic foods to even just foods like snack foods or whatever the case is, just to try to get someone by. My body was not accepting that. And actually, my body would hope or would over exert itself and hyperfixate itself for the foods that were commonly foods that I would eat all the time, to it being in a panic and a frenzy. And it was just such a toss over. But I mean, even the smallest conditions, I could go and take a shower or brush my teeth, right? I could go just move rooms, at that time, I have a 4-year-old, and she's medically sensitive. So like, she needs a little bit more attention. I mean, I couldn't even be a father to her. So like, it was just one of those things where like, it was really dependent on my partner. It was really dependent on just some of the family members that would come by at that time to really just do what they didn't have to do and step in, because I wasn't able to do anything. And the more confusing and the more hard part for me personally was just not having answers. I was seeing 10 to 12 different specialists. I went through treatments and tests. I mean, being out of the ER about 4 or 5 times a week, including urgent cares and seeing, different specialists. It was draining, but I think the worst of it was just not having any answers. There was times where I would be quoted like, some of the testing that I got done, because I mean, I would be there some of the days for like a good 7+ hours. And each time they quoted me talking about, I've had about 1.2 to about $900,000 of just testing done within that day. Yeah, dude, it was legit. Like we could not figure out at all what it was. And because I thought it was like, okay, this medication was really what put me in this situation. What's going on? But I would come out of different doctor's offices and different specialists, and they'll look at me like, well, man, out of all the millions of blood tests that we would do, they're like, we don't know what's going on. I mean, they were suspicious about, my heart rate. They were suspicious about the blood pressure because, all those were abnormal. But through multiple EKGs, ECGs, multiple different testings on their aspect, they're like, it doesn't, we're not seeing anything else on why this would spark. And so when I would go see a specialist, they would look at me and be like, well, I mean, son, you're healthier than me. And I'm like, you have me messed up. Like, there's no way in hell that you're going to sit there and say that to me, when ultimately in this situation, I'm like, I'm not coming to you for no reason. I'm not sitting there trying to bring up a bill. And it was to the point where, Adam, I'm not even kidding, I got literally kicked out of 2 different hospitals, 2 different emergency rooms, because they were looking at me like, you keep coming in here and we're causing more trouble trying to treat you. We're hurting you more trying to figure this out, instead of you just staying home. I just remember sitting there like feeling like at that point, like it felt like an end. You know what I'm saying? It really just felt like, and me being able to do that would be all the energy that I had, because when I would go home, I would have to just sit down and hope that my body would allow me to sleep, or hope that I would be able to eat food just to be able to keep myself nourished, and yeah, dude, it was a struggle. And there was times where I felt like that I almost lost my life because of it. And it felt like a never ending cycle.
I'm curious, what was that journey like? You'd spent time going down the specialist route, and then obviously I assume you turned to other options out there. So what was it specifically about the message that we do here at the Detox Blueprint? What stood out for you where you're like, that could be the answer for me?
First things first was a whole different approach. After a while of going through the Western medicine side of things, I learned that there was no way that I was going to get help. During that transition, I remember just one of the many days of just being in my bed. I had to be my own doctor, because I had to learn how my body was reacting, my new functionalities at that time, at least what it felt like per se, just for me to get by through the day. So with every 12 specialists that I was seeing, I was up all night because I had nothing else to do. And at that time, I was just doing an immense full amount of research, immense full amount of stuff on the holistic side of being like, okay, I've figured out what, that there's matching symptoms. What does that mean? And so trying to figure out things going on that end, I remember just kind of let it go. And I was basically at the time to accept a new norm, and just like a new way of being me, being like, okay, you know what, I'm just going to have to accept this. I don't know what this is. I don't know where this came from. I'm just going to have to deal with this. So it was slowly starting to crush me a little bit. And I remember as me feeling that, I was just going through social media, just scrolling. And I saw your page pop up. And What was really ironic was because you were talking about a lot of the same stuff, that I was, hearing talk about and things like that. And it was just one of the video clips that you usually post now of just like detox advice, different things like that. But I must have came across the right one at the right time, because when I came across the one, it was one that you were sharing, it was like an entourage video of you at a seminar, and you were explaining basically what what detox is, but you're also explaining the symptoms around it and how it's relative to toxins and different things like that, which I've heard fractionally about, but that was your focus. But just how it was explained and how it was said, it was just perfect. And I just remember just watching that. I was like, no, that makes sense. And I just remember liking it. I think at that point in time, I remember, I don't know if it was the same day or the next day, but I remember getting a message from you. And it totally could have been a promptu message, but it was just one of those things where it was just like, hey, thanks for, interacting with the post. If you don't mind me asking you, what are the things that you're feeling? What are the things that you're dealing with? Things like that. And so I remember when I messaged you back on that page, it was just like sparks flew. You know what I mean? Because you got back to me. It was direct communication. I remember laying out everything that I was going through, and I felt it was different because it was more personal, like off the bat.
So the good news is you joined the program and you got stuck straight in. And what I remember, D, is you were 110% into the whole process. You burned the boats. You were like, this has to work. And as you were saying earlier, the attention to detail was very thorough. And I loved it. You were messaging me with loads of questions because you really wanted to understand this content and understand how to implement it into your life. So what was the most powerful part of the program for you?
I think honestly, the most powerful part of the program was just the whole experience, man. From you taking me in, hearing my testimonials and just everything that I was going through, and just you having that effortless confidence of knowing that this would be able to work. The trust was one of the huge parts for me, was because it was with you, it was completely, it was ease, it was, after I remember when we were talking, it almost sounded too good to be true. It almost sounded too good to be like, this is exactly what I need. This is, what will help me move forward. Like, it was one of those things where, like, I remember looking at my partner and be like, so I found this person. And it was just very synchronistic, because it was like the time that you came was so imperative. There couldn't be at a more of a perfect time, because I feel like the universe knew the direction that I was trying to go to deal with this approach. And when you popped up, it was like, boom. So like that impact alone really played a huge role. The other thing that I would like to add on that as well was just, I remember with having that interaction being completely different, I was blessed to even be able to start the program. I was gifted, I'll just say a gift, to be able to allow myself into this program, because outside of, getting to know you and talking to you, the prices were different. Things were different. The energy was different. And wanting to really make this work, the universe was able to be like, okay, let me help you make this work. So it just, the way that it came together was just very like, no, this is meant to be. So with that being said, I think the biggest impact for me was just one, establishing that trust and knowing that there was a reason for this to happen. The second part would just be, honestly, man, you working with me through the program. Like, I remember, man, just being so uptight and just so scared and nervous, which, I mean, with everything that I was dealing with, I could on one hand say rightfully so. But it was you really just taking the time and really allowing me to think and feel, the way that I need to, allowing me to share with you my worries, right? Share with you the things that were holding me back. And you just being there with such an open heart, open mind, and an open ear. Like, the treatments and the protocols alone, I think that's what really made that impact, because when my nervous system was allowed to feel okay and safe, it allowed my body to be able to reciprocate with the protocols. I think that would have to be the main thing for me on what I could say was probably the most impactful. And not to shoot down the protocols by a long shot. Each of them had their places, and they helped tremendously. But it was just the built up love in many different words, that was there, that really allowed that process to even come to fruition.
That's powerful, man. And you know what? The funny thing is, it's not just about the information, right? It's about, being in a safe container, feeling safe, feeling looked after. I mean, all of that stuff really counts, right? And that opens the body up to release toxins, to heal. So I love that. And I love that you felt that in the program. And we really do put a lot of effort in making people feel welcome and supported. And not, it's so sad when people join a program that they just feel like a number, right? Whereas I feel we really, we want people to heal. We want to take them through that journey. So that's lovely to hear. And I feel it's a big part of the whole process, right? It's not just about doing stuff. It's about feeling safe and led and secure through a transformation. So what have you experienced since implementing what you've learned in the program? What results have manifested? So obviously, when you joined, you've gone through a long list of different practitioners and a real stressful time, really dialing into trying to figure out what's going on. You went through this process. So tell me, the other side, what was it like for you? What results did you get?
So I remember, and for the people listening as well, like I remember the main symptoms out of being able to figure out of what I was dealing with. It was heavy brain fog. It was food sensitivities and intolerances, and gut issues, like gut and constipation issues. It was nervous system issues as well, dysregulation, brain fog, if I didn't say that already, and sleep disturbances. So those were like the main 6 that I remember dealing with. After the program, it was immediately food sensitivities and intolerances, which I know that you and me both remember were like one of the biggest things for me. That went away. Actually, that went away mid-program, towards mid-end. And that was actually really beautiful because outside of just finding a new way of eating, a better way of eating, I was able to flirt with, old foods, favorite foods of mine and things like that again without having to worry about that. My gut issues and dysbiosis went away, completely. I remember being able to just not having to deal with even after meals or eating cleaner foods, things like that, where my body would seem to like want to react a certain different way or anything like that. Like I wasn't having those issues just vanished. It disappeared. My brain fog got way clearer. I remember, being able to like motility issues, things like that went back to regulation, which was really huge. And just overall, my energy levels came back. The other symptom that I forgot to mention was like it was the chronic fatigue symptoms, and post exertion malaise symptoms that I was dealing with. Outside, right, I want to say right after the food intolerances left, that energy levels came back for me. Like I wasn't getting overexerted. I was able to walk around the house. I could shower. I could, do personal things. I could play with my kid. That was one of the biggest things for me, because not feeling like that I could be a dad to my daughter was one of the hardest things for me to be able to accept or even be a pill to swallow, and so being able to have those levels of energy back, just to be able to play with her, pick her up. I mean, even wanted to take her out for ice cream, just the little things. Like it brought so much joy and peace, things that I never would really think at that point in time, just kind of being like the average human, that really mattered. It really, that experience really showed me that like the little details, really, really make the bigger picture. And the things that we kind of take for granted in life, man, was the huge highlight. Those little things that I wish I could do, I was able to. I just remember feeling just grateful and so happy, because it was, my life was coming back. And over time to present day now, like everything has vanished. I think, now it's coming towards more of like just getting to where I want to be on a nervous system level. I'm not saying that it's not even healed, because I feel, like I said, it's been a huge transformation. Like I feel like it went from, start to finish essentially, but just kind of now it's just being on more personal choices, personal level things that I want to kind of do for myself, things that I've, was even considering way before I even got sick. But yeah, outside of that, man, it's been such a transition, such a new leaf.
I love it, man. And, it's been great getting messages from you post program, how you've been helping others, right? Because they've seen the change in you and they've been like, D, what are what you've been doing? And then you've been kind of passing on that information, and then you've been seeing that improve people. So it's a beautiful thing when you go through a transformation, and then you're like, wow, okay, I feel the difference. You pass the information on if they want to hear it, right? They've got to want to be receptive to it. But again, hearing some of the messages of you kind of post-program saying, I'm now even spreading this message in my community. That's very powerful. So looking back, where do you think you'd be today if you hadn't have taken the step of joining the program?
Honestly, probably just still bedridden. Knowing myself, you couldn't take the fight out of me. That's for sure. So I would probably still be there trying to figure out like what to do, where to go, just a lot more just down and just kind of monotone and just very just, down in the dumps about it, I guess, per se. But I think I would just still be on my couch, man, if it wasn't for you in the program, if I'm being honest.
So if someone's watching this right now and they're still unsure about booking a consultation with our team, what would you say to them?
I think the biggest thing that I would say is trust yourself. Everyone's journey is specific for them. But I would say trust yourself, because when I was in your guys' situation, all I wanted was help. All I wanted was a helping hand, and answers. And if you feel like that everything that you have heard or learned about through these programs or watching his videos or things along those lines, even attending a seminar or even a webinar, I would say if there is any correlation that you feel within what has been spoken of things that you're dealing with, trust yourself. Trust that. Allow that to be the guide. Because in my experience and in all with what I did, I mean, for first and foremost, you know yourself better than anyone else, and you know your body better than anyone else. But when you have that pull, when you have that feeling to lean in, that's a little bit more than your brain telling you. That's your heart. That's your intuition. That's pulling you to that. There's a reason that you're having that feeling. There's not it's not coincidental, because how many times do you need to come across quote unquote coincidences to understand that there's a real message behind that, right? When you have something that's pulling you to that, that's faith. And you don't deny that, right? There's a reason that there's that's pulling you. So if you're feeling that, lean into that, trust into that, and allow that energy, allow that vibration to guide you in this perspective. Because coming from someone that felt like that life was over, that had nothing with this and was down bad, going through this program, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Me doing the exact same thing I'm telling you guys and following that feeling. Just, trust the journey, allow the process to be what it is, man. Life's about the journey, not the destination. And ultimately you get to create that destination, but it's you being in that present moment, allowing yourself to take each step without seeing the full staircase.
D, I love it. I love your words, man. I love how you're very poetic with how you deliver your message. So I want to thank you for taking the time today, man. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. And thank you for D for coming on and telling his story of his great transformation. If you're watching right now and you're interested in working on yourself and detoxifying your body, and you have a couple of questions about what we do, book a call by clicking the link provided below this video and we can chat. On the call, we're going to figure out a couple of things. Firstly, what is your goal? Secondly, what's holding you back from achieving your health goal? And then thirdly, getting clear on how to fix that. So book the call on the calendar before it gets filled up. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.